Hello, and thank you guys. Thanks for coming to another episode of Tabar's 2 Cents, where I bring on experts in whatever field or niche that they have excelled in, and share their story with you and share how they differentiate themselves from the rest of the crowd in their particular industry. Today, I'm very lucky and very fortunate to have Mark Weisleder, senior partner at the Real Estate Lawyers. It's one of the busiest law firms in the GTA in Ontario, actually. And Mark, how many transactions would you say you guys take a year?
Let's just say we're busy.
You're busy.
Okay, we're busy, but I'm more excited about how we've adapted, especially during the pandemic.
For sure, we're gonna get to that. So, guys. Their website is literally the realestateLawyers.ca. So they must have been around for a long time to kind of catch that name. So Mark, why don't you share with us how you guys are different and how you guys have adapted throughout this pandemic, this crazy pandemic that everybody thought that the world was ending, but it seems like the real estate market thrived and continued to appreciate at a pace or nobody could have predicted.
That's correct. And nobody knew how everybody was going to react. I commend the real estate agent profession for completing or pivoting to be able to show properties online, arrange showings safely, and continue to market and close real estate deals over the term of the pandemic. And as lawyers, we also had to adapt as well. And our goal was, how do we do this so that we can do an entire transaction virtually or remotely so that the client is safe always? And we already had things developed before the pandemic that we didn't know would assist us so much. So as an example, before the pandemic, we said to any client, no matter where you are, we're going to go to you to sign up all the closing papers. So you don't have to travel. You could do it at your convenience. And we would come to the client with an iPad and they would sign all the paperwork on an iPad. As soon as the pandemic hit and people didn't want people to come to them, we arranged so that all the paperwork could be signed in a Zoom meeting with DocuSign, so that as long as the person had access to the internet, we could sign all the paperwork in a Zoom meeting at the client convenience. But even during the pandemic, there were some elderly clients who could not use the internet. So we said, we'll come to you with a mask and still sign all the paperwork safely. So we covered all the paperwork that way. Now for a seller, we do the same thing. And sellers, of course, they want their funds after closing. Well, we had already developed a system that we pay every seller, including every real estate agent, with an electronic funds transfer the day after closing. So this way the money goes right into their account. No hold by the bank the day after closing. So really, we cover almost everything. The final piece, of course, is the keys. How do we get the keys? And so what we have always done is we gave our sellers our own company lockbox, and they would put the lockbox on the front door of their home with the keys when they leave for the last time. And that way, as soon as the buyer law firm puts the money in our trust account, we give the buyer the code, and the buyer just goes to the house and lets themselves in. So this was our solution before the pandemic, but it just made so much common sense during the pandemic because it allowed for a safe exchange of keys. And the seller really didn't have to see anyone. And of course, we're always available with questions. Now, for buyers, we sign papers the same way. But then there's the question of the closing proceeds. And as you can imagine, during the pandemic, banks are using shorter hours. They don't have as much staff. They're very nervous about masks. At our firm, to my knowledge, we are the only law firm in Ontario that's registered as a bill payment at every major bank. And we did this initially so that we could easily move money from banks to banks because many law firms have different banks that they use. But the beauty is, I know that you may pay many bills online. You may pay hydro online. So what do? You look for hydro as a bill payment and you just pay online and it costs you nothing. Well, buyers can actually pay us the balance required for closing in a bill payment. They don't have to stand in line at a bank. They don't have to get a mask. They just go online, add my firm, pay us the funds. And sometimes they say, oh, we have a limit of 50,000. It's okay. Just make 3 payments, make 4 payments of 50,000. We'll get them all. We'll close your deal. So you see, even for a buyer, we have been able to try to make the entire deal extremely safe. And that leaves me, of course, available to answer any questions that people have, because, there's lots of questions in putting a real estate deal together. And that's where I spend a lot of my time helping and giving webinars to educate real estate salespeople on every part of the business.
I've sat in on many of those seminars that you've given, and you're always a wealth of knowledge. And I just wanted to just kind of give the Coles Notes version of what you said. So essentially, a buyer and seller can transact in real estate from the comfort of their couch without even having to get off their couch. You've really thought of all the angles. It's funny, when I worked with back 12 years ago, when I was focusing most of my career on resale, first-time home buyers didn't really realize what they wanted out of their house. They didn't realize that a basement laundry is off limit, like it's a make or break. So sometimes you have to live in a home for a few years before you realize what's a make or break. You guys have been doing this for 35 years. You've really understood both buyers and sellers' needs, and you've attacked that, and you've come up with solutions that really makes the transaction seamless.
Thank you.
So yeah, thank you for that. I mean, I had so many of my clients compliment this referral that when we sent to you, and I think. But
also, we're very transparent. So when somebody says how much you charge, I always say, go to our website.
Yeah.
Go into the quote, put it in, and you'll see exactly what we charge. We don't play any games. We want to be transparent.
That's great.
Not just about our services, but also about the pricing. And so I'm very proud of the way we're set up, because we disclose everything and we have satisfied clients and satisfied agents.
So I actually have a few questions about the market for you, because I know that you're on the legal side of things, but you also see transaction volume and sale prices. And what's your opinion on why the pandemic did not cause a problem or a decline in prices or sales volume, actually?
I'm not an economist, so I can't comment a lot about those things. But I think the main combination was the historic super low interest rates. That continues to fuel the market, because people are allowed to borrow pretty close to what they're paying in rent in order to buy. And then those that buy, they encourage the move-up buyers. There wasn't as much immigration during the pandemic. And so that's what people were afraid of. A lot of people were afraid that, oh my God, if there's not immigration, because we're slowing all this down during the pandemic, this will cause a bit of a slowdown in the market. Instead, we didn't see that. But now, as we come out of the pandemic, I have always said to people that, if you ask anyone in the world, and this is a crazy world, and you said to them, there are 3 places in the world you could live, which would you choose? One of those 3 would probably be the Greater Toronto area. And the reason is we speak more languages, we have more cultures in our GTA than anywhere in the world. So anyone can find countrymen. And so when somebody says, oh, the market's going to go down, I mean, we have an election coming. It's hard to say what's going to happen. But everything I read is that these low interest rates are with us for a long time. The whole world wants to come here. And so that's my take on why the market has not changed that much and why it probably will not change. Yes, of course, there may be dips like we've always seen, but you don't buy a house generally for a quick flip. If you're in it for the long term, you're not going to lose money. And that's pretty much the experience, for example, that many have found with pre-construction condos.
Love
in
that.
Yeah, when you buy your condo, you're talking about 4 years, usually, from the time you sign a piece of paper until it's finished. During that 4 years, the market may come down. There's no question. But historically, the difference in price between day one and 4 years from now, usually, I would say over 90% of the people have been able to realize a profit in doing that. And that's why pre-construction is still very popular. However, when you buy a pre-construction detached house, I always warn people, the turnaround time from signing to closing is usually about 15 to 18 months. There will be a market change in 15 to 18 months. So you got to make sure you've got your financing in order and everything, going, because that's where some people I have found run into trouble, that in 15 months from signing, they don't have it together, or they've got to sell their house and now the market's changed a little bit. So, but with a pre-construction condo, I have rarely seen that happen.
Yeah, it goes back to your saying that if you think with the long term in mind, you're not going to lose. And pre-construction condos kind of force you into a long-term real estate investment. It's something that I recognized early on is that you shouldn't be day trading real estate. This isn't the stock market. There are dips, there are peaks and valleys, and just as long as you're not selling in the dip, you're going to do fine. And as long as you can weather those little corrections every now and then, you're going to do okay.
I agree. There's no sure thing in anything, as you know, but I think that history has states have historically done better, been better, safer than in other kinds of speculative investments. And people always like to say, if you have 100,000 to invest in the market, the stock market, you can do that. But no bank is going to give you 400,000 so you can invest 500,000 in the stock market.
I love that.
How smart you are. But if you have 100,000 and you want to buy a $500,000 house, it's not hard to find somebody to lend you that 400,000 to buy that 500,000 house. And that's why, in general, your money goes a lot farther.
Sure. Real estate
than in other forms of investments that are much more speculative.
It's true. It's true. I mean, with that, with that math, all you need is a 5% growth per year, and in 4 years, you've doubled your initial investment, right? So
that's typically how the math works out. But it's not a guarantee. Like, you don't like to guarantee everything. One thing I like about the REC team, to me, that's very important, is they check out the developer first before they agree to work with them. Because, when people come to me with these contracts, I generally say them, they're all the same. They're all heavily weighted on the developer side.
Sure. If
the developer wants to cancel, they don't sell enough units, they cancel without real penalty. And all you're going to do is get your money back. And a lot of people, as you know, have been heartbroken to find out 2 years, 3 years after they sign papers, well, the builder can't go ahead. Yeah, we're getting our money back, but now it's going to cost us a fortune to buy the same unit because prices have gone up. And so, I always say to people, the best thing you can do right now before you sign this paper is go research the developer. How many other buildings have they built? Do they finish on time? Do they fulfill their promises? You got to go to speak to the people, the buyers, and that to me is the most important thing with every pre-construction purchase. So, I know that when I work with agents, for example, from REC, they've done that. They're not going to, devote so much time to market a builder's units without having done that due diligence. Now, of course, they can't guarantee. Nobody can guarantee anything, but that's the kind of research that a buyer has to do. It's not about the piece of paper and the clauses. Yes, we can talk about the clauses, but it's more. Is this developer going to finish this thing on time? Because that's when you're going to see your profit.
That's a great point. Yeah, I think there's over 200 cranes in the sky right now. So, for a first-time pre-construction condo investor, how do you decide where is my money the safest, or where will it grow the fastest and the strongest over the course of construction? So that's something that we analyze with our pre-construction investors all the time. There's the reputation of the developer is super, super important. Location is super, super important. Future infrastructure that's going up around this particular building is super important. Timing is super important. You don't want to get into a pre-construction condo 2 years after it's launched because you've seen so much. The developer has increased pricing by so much. You've missed a lot of the growth there. So it's funny that I wanted to touch on investing in pre-construction condos and some of the hidden costs that come with that. So I've noticed that a lot of developers now have been adding clauses in that will restrict the investor from assigning certain privileges to the future buyer or the assignee. Can you touch on some of the clauses that you would think as are red flags that certain buyers should look out for?
Well, there's also, you have to understand, there's two different kinds of people who buy a pre-construction condo. There are those that want to move in.
Yeah.
They're buying this as a future place to move into, lifestyle, 3 or 4 years. And so they want to have a real certainty as to what they are going to pay when they move in. And that's when all these hidden charges come up, because there's typically 2 pages in every agreement that lists all the additional charges that you're going to pay on closing on top of your purchase price with the HST. So there's the purchase price you see on the front page of your contract. You might pay extra for the parking and the locker, but that's all right away. But then in the hidden, there's 2 pages of additional charges. And in my experience, most of the charges are pretty much, you can determine them right away, whether it's $500 to $1,000 each. But then there are some unusual ones which are left open. And the most common one is development charges. In other words, a builder may not know when they start construction what all the total development charges, park levies they may have to pay with the municipality by the time they're finished. So they say, well, if we have to pay this, we're going to allocate it and everybody's going to have to pay their share. Well, this is a scary number. And so many developers, in order to put some certainty in the agreement, will put some caps on it. And they'll say to a buyer, no matter what happens, you will not pay more than $10,000 for a 1-bedroom, $15,000 for a 2-bedroom. And when people say, is this reasonable? In most cases, it's reasonable. It's very hard to predict 3 or 4 years down the road what all these charges are going to be. Another charge is the utility meters. Now, utility meters can cost up to $1,500 each. And so that could be $3,000, $4,000 on closing. Sometimes a developer will say, you're not going to pay more than $1,000 to connect the utilities. So now a buyer, besides knowing how much they're paying for the unit, they can also figure out in their head, this is how much all these additional charges are going to be. And that's terrific. And so that's what a lawyer, we do. We go through these charges. We try to negotiate maybe a reduction with the builder lawyers during that 10-day cooling off period. But in my experience, most of the incentives that a buyer gets at the sales office, it's pretty much, that's it, that the builder is going to go. And that's why I said originally, more important that you do the due diligence, is this project going to be finished? But a lot of people, they're buying this as an investment. Mm-hmm. They intend to lease, number one, at occupancy. They don't want to move in. And you got to make sure you have the right to lease, because some developers don't want this. So you must make sure that that's negotiated up front, that you have the right to lease at occupancy. Now, legally, what it means is you're going to have to pay a little bit extra in HST at final closing because you're not moving in. But because you're leasing it, you get all that money back after closing. So it's just a timing issue. Usually it's about $24,000, $25,000, but it won't stop you from leasing your unit out. So, but that's an important thing to get right away. The other provision is the assignment. And this is what many people are looking for, because a lot of people, when they sign this contract today, their thinking is, I'll pay the deposits, But then in 4 years, when this property has gone up in value, I want to sell it before I even close and make a profit. And you need the right to do that in order to make that profit. In other words, you must have that right of assignment.
Sure.
As an example, with a detached house, most builders will give no right of assignment. They don't want anybody flipping that house because it competes typically with the builder's phase 2 or phase 3. So they say right away, don't even think about coming to us. You got to close that deal. That's why. You see, I said earlier, with a detached house, you got to make sure you can close because you may not have any right to assign. With a condo, many builders will permit it as long as they've sold 90% of the units. They say, we'll allow it. We might give you a fee, might be $5,000. Some people waive the fee. That's where REC, I know, has done very good by their clients to reduce the assignment fee. However, you see, you got to read this very carefully because some builders say, yeah, we'll give you the right to assign. Yes, but remember those caps we gave you, all those incentives at the sales office? That won't apply to the new buyer, which means the new buyer who you're selling for a profit, we're going to have the ability to raise those additional charges. And then, of course, you see that hurts you when you try to assign because your buyer is going to say, well, now it may cost us an extra $10,000 in these additional charges. We want to split it with you.
Yeah.
We're not going to give you the whole profit. We want to split it with you. So this is why, the wording of every agreement of purchase and sale, that's why you have 10 days to change your mind. You send it to a lawyer. The lawyer points this out. We go back to the builder lawyer and then say, you know what, we'd like you to make a change so that if we do assign, the new buyer gets the caps. And we'll find out right away if the builder says yes or no. And so this is where the lawyer can help you. But what the lawyer doesn't do is tell you this builder for sure is going to finish. We don't know that. No, we can't give that advice. Is this builder, going to do this? Now, I've had situations, for example, where certain builders, and I don't like mentioning names, they refuse to put a cap ever on a development charge. And I've spoken to the lawyers for the builder, and I've said, it's a little scary for a buyer. And the lawyer said, in 30 years, they have never charged anything at closing because they budget so well that they don't have to charge extra. But they're not going to change their agreement. That's it. If it happens, it happens. And then I explain the same thing to the client. These people have been around for a long time. They care a lot about their reputation. They don't have a good reputation by hitting people with all these additional charges at the last minute because it becomes public and it's negative. So, this is not a one size fits all. You have to know who you're dealing with and then what you can request, during this 10-day period. And we do a lot of that. We get a lot of these agreements. I try to tell people, get them in early so we can review it, send you what we propose to send to the builder lawyers, then we send it, and then we give a response. And if the builder lawyer says no to everything, it's up to the client. You want to go ahead or not. But, when people say, why is the builder being so difficult? Well, the answer usually is they've got a list of buyers who want to take over your unit because it's selling out so well. So they can afford to say no to everything. So every situation is different. And that's why what you have to think about before you make that final decision after 10 days that you're going ahead.
Love that. Yeah, no, it's a lot of information. It's a lot of knowledge. At REC, we're big believers of staying in your lane. Like my niche is pre-construction condos. We have resale agents on our team who focus specifically on resale. We have commercial agents that focus specifically on commercial. I mean, look at your law firm. You're not going to take on family law or immigration law. You guys know your stuff and you stay in your lane and you're good at it. So what I got out of your speech there was that, it's really important that you work with somebody who knows what they're doing when it comes to this. Obviously, there are no guarantees in real estate investing, but there are ways to mitigate your risk by doing research on your developer Just because they don't add caps in their levies, it's not the end of the world. They've sold buildings before without caps on their levies, and they rely on their goodwill and their reputation to keep them moving forward. So it's not cut and dry. Not every situation is the same. You really should work with an expert in whatever field it is that you're investing in, so that they can explain it to you and not scare you away from a good deal. You did touch on HST. I did want to. I wanted to talk about that for a second, a little bit further. What's the purpose of HST? Why does a developer have to ask you to pay that, or pay it themselves, depending on the occupants of that unit? Where did this all come into play? This new housing, the HST bill.
Yeah. So, as you know, when you buy a resale home, there's no HST on a resale home. So right. HST is not an issue at all with a resale home because there's no HST.
It's only paid once.
Yeah, it's already been paid. And so there's no payment when you buy a resale home. You never have to think about HST. However, when you buy a brand new condominium, the builder has to include HST into the price. They have to include it into the price. And there's also something called an HST rebate. And an HST rebate is typically an amount that every buyer is entitled to claim from the government if they move into the unit at closing. So, as an example, let's say you're buying a condominium for $500,000. The real price of that condo at closing should be $524,000. That's the real price.
Okay.
And so the builder should be charging $524,000. And then after closing, you go to CRA and you say, I moved into this house, so I'm entitled to a $24,000 rebate, and the government pays you back $24,000, and so your net you would end up paying is $500. The builders realize that this is going to be very difficult for many buyers to pay this extra $24,000 and then go to the government and get it back. So what the builder is saying in every contract, don't worry, you're not going to pay $524. You're going to pay me $500 at closing, but you're still entitled to that $24,000. So we're going to make you sign a piece of paper that says, yes, you're moving in, and you're going to give the builder your entitlement to that $24,000 HST rebate. So now you're only going to pay $500, and it's up to the builder to go collect it from the government. So you see, the builder has done this to make it easier for people, so they don't have to pay it out and ask for it back. But you see, the HST rebate only works if you're moving into the property yourself. If you decide to rent the property as an investment, which many do, now the builder is not allowed to get that money back from the government. You are, but the builder isn't. So now the builder says, okay, we're going to let you rent it, but now we have to charge you that whole $524. But it's okay, after closing, you could apply for right back because you leased it. As long as you leased it, you can apply for that $24,000 right back. And since most investors lease it at occupancy, it's already leased. The day after closing, they can apply for it back. And, people ask me, do I help them with the rebate? I found a long time ago, it's always good to have experts to help you with things. So I know a company that all they do is rebates. I just tell the client, go to this person. They know what they're doing. They're going to get you the money back faster because they know how to do it. And we give them all the paperwork they need. So this way, the investor has to pay that $24,000, but they get it all back after closing by filing the correct paperwork. It usually takes 2 to 3 months to get it. So that's what the reason for that is, because with an investment, the builder cannot claim that $24,000 at closing. If you're moving in, the builder can claim it.
Why is it $24,000? Where did they come up with this number?
The HST rebate is always dependent on the purchase price. The minute the purchase price hits $484,500,
okay,
then we don't have anymore the old 5% GST portion. And there used to be a 5% GST and an 8% PST. That's where it all comes from. Yeah. And once you hit that number, it will always be 24,000. Whether it's a 500,000 condo, $1 million, or 2 million, it's 24,000.
It's just
now between 350 and 450, there is still an element of the 5% that comes into play. So the HST rebate could fluctuate between, at the low end, 19,000, at the high end, 27, 28,000, when this 5% is part of it. So it's never going to be more than 28. It's never going to be less than 18, 19. But in my experience, in today's market, almost every new condo, we're at this 484,000 month. So rather than break people's head with the math, I just say 24,000. That's going to be your number. Don't worry about anything else. And it helps me to explain it, just like I'm explaining it to you right now. It makes it easier for you to understand.
Just kind of a rough idea, rule of thumb, and I don't think 484,500 exists anymore in pre-construction condos in Toronto.
Yeah, I know that too. Now, of course, it exists outside, and you can
outside for sure, Durham. Yeah,
but it's the same principle. You're going to pay a little bit of extra HST or not lower on closing, and either you apply for it back or the builder applies for it back on your behalf.
Okay, well, I know you're a busy guy. I just have one last question, and this one I get all the time because most of my people are investors. I want to talk about capital gains versus income tax. How does one prepare for their tax payment if they choose the assignment route? If they choose to go with an assignment and not become a landlord, or if they do become a landlord for a short amount of time, maybe 6 months or so, what is the difference in terms of costs? I know you're not an accountant, but I'm sure you've seen so many of these in your
yeah, I've seen a lot. You see, whenever people come to me with an assignment and they're a seller, I have to point out all the possible tax implications before they make a decision, because every assignment is usually conditional on seller lawyer, buyer lawyer approval. So for a buyer, I just have to do the same kind of exercise. I have to explain all the additional charges that they have to pay and when they have to pay it, et cetera. But for a seller, it's tricky, because when a seller is selling an assignment of a new condominium, it means he's actually selling a new unit, not a resale. And so CRA has always said that any profit you make on a pre-construction, unless you can prove that you were moving into this unit, you likely will have to charge HST on the profit.
Okay.
Now, that HST, the buyer does not get back. There's no application, there's no rebate. So what happens is, let's say the seller's an investor and they sold for 100,000 profit.
Sure.
And then they come to me. I'm going to tell them, you're going to have to pay HST on that.
On that 100,000.
So it'll be similar to you paying or charging 87,500 plus HST, which means you're going to have to remit 12,500 to the government. And then, so the seller's going to say to me, I don't like that. I want to make 100 profit. Well, I said, if you want to make 100 profit, you have to charge 113, right?
Yeah.
You have to charge 113.
Right.
So then they go back to the agent and say, I have to add 13,000 because I want to clear 100. The buyer has no more money. This is a discussion you should have had before you made a price, because I said, understand this, that if HST is payable, and I'm not your account, I don't know if you were buying it for yourself. I don't know if you were buying it in an investor. Everyone's different. That's why people have to speak to an accountant before they make this final decision. So there's HST, that's number one. Number two, you raise a good question. People understand what a capital gain is in this country. In other words, if you make 100,000 in income, you pay tax on 100,000. But people know as well that if I've sold a property that I've owned for many years, I bought it for 100, I'm selling for 200. I made 100 profit, but I only paid tax on 50. which is 50% of the gain. So people understand that. However, these assignments are tricky because you never owned anything. You bought a piece of paper. A few years later, you sold the piece of paper and you made 100,000 profit. So the government could say, you know what? This is income. This isn't the capital gain, meaning you have to pay tax on the full 100. Or they could say it's capital gain and you only pay tax on 50. So again, as a lawyer, I can't give this advice. I don't know what CRA is going to do because a lot of it has to do with a person's history as an investor.
Sure.
If you buy and sell properties, then you're in the business. They're going to hit you with income. But if you do one every 5 years, you're not like a regular investor, they may say, okay, capital gain, okay, you were going to move in, you don't have to charge HST, but people have to be aware of those possibilities when they sign these agreements as a seller. They have to speak to their accountant first, because I've had people say to me, oh, I'm going to make all this money, I want to assign. And then I say, well, you're going to have to pay tax, and you're going to have to pay HST, and you're going to have to pay real estate commission. They deducted all those amounts and they made no money. So I said, maybe you should think about this before you rush to assign. Factor in, you got to pay these things. See what you're going to net before you make the decision to assign.
I have a client that every time one of his children turns 18, he puts a condo in their name so that he always saves on the taxes.
Well, that's another issue with names and first-time buyer rebates and all the other stuff that people do, to try to reduce all the taxes down the road. And, again, these are things you discuss with financial advisors, lawyers as well before you start moving properties around.
100%, Mark. Thank you so much. Honestly, you've given me so much of your time. I really appreciate it. The real estate industry is so vast and it changes all the time. And just like you had to adapt this morning with instead of using Zoom, you had to click this link. We as self-employed, we have to adapt as well, and I'd love to have you back on here at some point just to pick your brain again. You're always a wealth of knowledge. If you want to say anything in closing, please. No,
I appreciate the opportunity. Anybody has a question, it's easy to find me, Mark, M-A-R-K, at realestateLawyers.ca.
Great.
Any question, email, you need help with anything, I'm very happy to help you out. And so again, it was a pleasure. I'm amazed myself when I can connect to these things and they work, that's the miracle. And I like to say that when I did my first Zoom, it had one person and I was lost. And then my daughter had to leave university because of the pandemic. And Treb asked me to do a webinar and there were 500 people.
Oh gosh.
Joined, and I was terrified. My daughter sat with me here at the office and took me through it.
Yeah.
And I was so happy. She taught me how to do a Zoom. I went from not knowing how to do one person to doing 500 people webinars. And so that was the blessing, of the pandemic. So
for sure.
We're all learning. So I thank you for the opportunity and I wish you only success.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you again.
You're very welcome. Have a great day.
You too. Bye now.